Hi, you guys. I want to welcome you all to my presentation, and it's entitled, Who Will You Try to Resuscitate? It is a presentation on care for our COM 616 class, Communicating Mindfully for Queen's University of Charlotte by Jaleesa Campbell. Hope you guys enjoy. When we think about resuscitation, we probably imagine a person rolling in on a gurney out of an ambulance, needing assistance, possibly cannot breathe. Um, we think about hospital scenes when we think about resuscitation. But after watching a documentary, I thought about resuscitation a little bit differently. And I know that I have two pictures of two men before you, and you're like, well, I don't know who these men are. But I would like to introduce these two men to you later into our presentation. A personal connection of myself to the topic of care. When I was looking at the list of topics, care stood out to me as I thought about my current place in life, how I'm going through different things, trying to figure things out, and how I also sometimes help out with my grandparents and provide care. And if you have provided care in the past, or if you know about caregiving, it can sometimes not be an easy journey. But I do believe that there is purpose to the part of this life that you're a part of. Yet an ESPN documentary showed me a different perspective of care, and the title of it was Pink Kings, which actually is a spin on the phrase kingpin, which I thought was pretty interesting. And I want to tell you guys about this a little bit later. But first, what is care? Care is a human answer to the call of the other, a willingness to meet and attend to someone to someone other than oneself. And care is also the communicative action or practice that links to the good of responsiveness to the other, and can even involve responding to a call that is unwanted. And I'm sure that many of us have had calls that we didn't necessarily want, right? Whether that's finding out something disastrous has happened, or maybe someone's broken down, someone's sick, and we've been put into a place where we've been in a position that we needed to respond, which is the ethical action to do. Yet when things don't necessarily go as we had hoped, Viktor Frankl mentions the final freedom. When it seems that all roads that we seek to follow are blocked, our final freedom rests in our stand against the inevitable. So Viktor Frankl mentions this aspect of the final freedom as facing the roads that you are trying to travel, or the paths, and they have been blocked. So you've tried different options, but you are facing something that you've come to and you have to deal with. Also, Martin Buber brings up dialogue necessitates response. Healthcare communication ethics is a call to responsibility defined not by demand or acquiescence, but by responsiveness. So it's ethical that we respond, not necessarily through demand or acquiescing, but that we make a move in the time that is needed. So this brings me to Pink Kings, Alex DeCuba's and Kevin Patterson's story. And when I was watching this documentary, I felt like this story seemed like something out of a book. I said, this can't be real. It made me think about an anecdote that I had heard a while back about two people who once knew each other. They went separate ways. One became a judge, and he was brought into the courtroom, and here they are face to face again. And when I was also watching this documentary on ESPN, since it was associated with Miami in the 80s, I was reminded of a video game, Vice City, from my childhood, based on the images that I was seeing of Miami and just thinking about the different things that the video game had in it and thinking about this story. But anyway, this is a story about two men who were once young, who wrestled together, and they became well known. Alex would take up for Kevin if anybody messed with him. And just to tell you a little bit about Alex, Alex's father was a big supporter of him, who would come to his games, he would cheer him on. He even called him El Tigre, which was something that to Alex it meant something to see his father's support for him. But later his father committed suicide. And at this point, Alex's choices appeared to down spiral. He left school, he started associating with criminals, he worked in the drug smuggling industry of cocaine. They were moving drugs across the ocean by planes, dropping them down to boats, which I was kind of stunned to see. And they had even built submarines that they would use to house the drugs and move them. So all the while Alex was involved with this, his friend Kevin was on another route. He went into the armed forces, he got married, he had a son. Yet in Kevin's life, the issue of drugs also came up. His wife was doing drugs, and Kevin was against that. And so Kevin made a very tough decision, and he filed for divorce. And this led to a very low point in Kevin's life. Kevin considered taking his life, but he felt that God stepped in and that there was another way. And he decided that he wanted to serve in law enforcement and wanted to fight against drugs. He wanted to make a difference. But little did both of these men know that they would come together again in a life-changing experience, both going in different directions yet crossing paths. Kevin heard about Alex's drug smuggling, and Alex was taken in. He was prosecuted under the Drug Kingpin Statute in 2003, and his sentence was 30 years. But amazingly, Alex only served 9 years of those 30, and since he cooperated with the government, and he was released in 2012. Now in that same year, Kevin also left the DEA. He began coaching wrestling in Florida, and he wondered how he could help Alex. So he decided to make Alex his assistant coach of the high school wrestling team. Now these men who were once captains of their wrestling team in their young days, who went in two opposite directions in life, became captains of a wrestling team together 39 years later, reunited. Alex's friend Kevin helped to resuscitate him. He restored him by acting like his brother's keeper. And this leads me to the video clip that I would like to show you guys. It is almost 10 minutes, but I believe that this video clip lifts the topic of care from the book and it brings it to life.
3 years later, in 2003, after meeting to discuss a future operation, Alex was driving to his home in Medellin. Colombian police pulled up next to me with the pretext that my vehicle, the papers were not good. And they asked me to open up the hood as if they were going to look at the VIN numbers. I saw this officer in civilian clothes. He was leaning up against the wall with a phone to his ear. He signaled over to me to come walking over. And as I walked over, I reached back to pull out my fake ID. And he waved at me not to bother. And he said my real name. He said, "Don't worry, don't do that, Alex." And I knew that was the end because I hadn't been called Alex for a very long time. They took me to the DOS building in Bogota, which supposedly is the most secure building in the country.
I was sitting in my cube in the embassy in Bogota. One of the agents sitting behind me, I heard him, he was on a phone conversation, and I heard him mention the name Alex de Cubas. And I remember saying, tapping him on the shoulder, I says, "Alex de Cubas, find out if that's the Cuban guy from Miami, Alex de Cubas." "Yeah, Alex de Cubas, they got him. Picked him up last night."
I was a fugitive for almost 13 years.
Uno de los hombres más buscados por las autoridades de Estados Unidos fue detenido por la policía en Medellín. Se trata de Alex de Cubas, de nacionalidad estadounidense.
They called me and said, "Hey, you want to come see this guy?" Yeah, man. I'll be there in 20.
There was two American-looking gentlemen that came walking in. I knew exactly what they were. One of them said to me, "Kevin says hello." And I said, "Kevin who?" He says, "Kevin Pedersen."
He got emotional. He's doing what I'm doing right now. He's wiping his eyes. He acknowledged, "Yeah, that's my friend. You know, I'm going to go home and see him."
Tonight, a former South Florida high school sports star is accused of trafficking drugs. Finally, they have Alex DeCubas in custody.
Officials say DeCubas had been on the run for the past 12 years.
Alex DeCubas of Palmetto say the feds was in on the smuggling of tens of thousands of pounds of coke, the value of which they claim exceeded $500 million.
The high school hero turned dope smuggler turned fugitive, and finally they have Alex DeCubas
For
in custody.
13 years now, claiming he is one of the biggest homegrown South Florida smugglers ever brought to justice.
In 2003, the U.S. government prosecuted 45-year-old Alex DeCubas under federal statute 848, known as the Drug Kingpin Statute. He pled guilty. We sentenced him. He got a sentence of 30 years, which I thought was appropriate and adequate given who Alex was. I asked him, what were you doing? Tell me your life. He would tell me some of those stories. You know, like when he built a submarine, things like that.
I remember asking him when I went up to visit him, I said, "Tell me the truth, Alex." I said, "Have you ever hurt anybody? Have you ever killed anybody?" He said, "No." And I chose to believe him.
With Alex in prison, Kevin continued fighting the war on drugs, earning distinguished honors over a 21-year career. In 2012, 54-year-old Kevin Pedersen retired from the DEA.
I'd accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish at DEA. There's nothing else I could have done. And so I really felt it was time to start something new.
You guys thought you were done with this nightmare.
That same year, Kevin began coaching wrestling at Westminster Christian School in Palmetto Bay, Florida.
I coach because I know that I'm supposed to coach.
Turn in, turn in, turn in, turn in, turn in, turn in. You got it. Ah!
I love the sport. I'm drawn to the sport. It's part of me.
There, go, go, go.
Kevin always told me that once he retired, he'd like to get involved in coaching full time, that he was going to try to find a place and build himself a program.
It was easy, very familiar surroundings. Wrestling hasn't changed much at all. A few little rule changes, but wrestling is still wrestling.
He can be an influence on the young men in that room that to affect who they will become, and he's taking advantage of that.
He's looking at all his wrestlers as extra sons.
No! Oh! You gotta go again. You almost had that.
All right, listen up, guys. Come on. We're going to go down there in a minute. Stand behind them. Be prepared to take the mat when they're done. Take direction from your captain. A lot of you don't know what's going on yet. Whenever Alex would come to my mind, I often think, how can I help him? And so there was a thought in my mind while I was coaching him. I don't have an assistant.
Have a seat. Been a long time.
Damn, this is beautiful. It's beautiful. 39 years after captaining their high school wrestling team,
We're already winning.
the two men were together again.
Try. Half.
Back on the mat. Alex as Kevin's assistant coach.
You got him! Yes!
Alex cooperated with the government and ultimately served only 9 of his 30-year sentence. He gained his release in 2012.
Just don't get yourself too worked up, you know. Stay calm. Remember your moves, your takedown.
It took a lot of heart.
It is the right thing to do. I mean, he's paid his price. He has an opportunity to do good. Doesn't mean that he will. But I'm going to encourage him to do it.
Yep, good job.
What was that score? 50-something to something? Make us feel like a champ, man.
Never in a million years did I ever have an inkling of imagination that Kevin and I would be standing on a wrestling mat as coaches together. There's no price I could put on that ever. It's made me feel so whole and so back to my roots. It's an incredible feeling, and I appreciate everything that has happened and the opportunity that the school gave me to be able to help those young guys.
Heavyweight from the other team.
Kevin and I have been friends for a long, long time. There's never been misunderstandings between him and I. He's lived a very distinguished life, and I've lived basically the opposite. And I feel proud to have him as my friend, and I hope he always will be till the end of my days.
Care extended in the resuscitation of a life. Kevin Patterson received a call that I'm sure he did not want. Kevin responded dutifully and justly, and Alex cooperated. After the devastating death of his father, Alex took a wrong turn in life. But Kevin took on the labor of care. He acted in a care for Alex by considering how he could help. Part of his decision to help likely came from remembering his past with Alex and seeing his face. Kevin found the tenacity to meet the need before him. The human face reminds us that I am my brother's keeper. Healthcare communication ethics takes us close to the human heart, even when someone or ourselves feel like we can't bear our troubles much longer. Response is the act of reaching out to another and to one's own problems. And with those thoughts in mind, even when we're faced with the unwanted, when we are confused and don't really know what road to take next, I believe that each of us has a purpose. So, who will we try to resuscitate? I want to thank each of you guys for taking the time out to watch my presentation. I hope that you enjoyed it and it was insightful, and these are my references. Thanks again.